and welcome everyone to yet another episode of our trailer analyses of the Marvel movies. And I am here joined with Jesse.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the show.
So, as you guys know, this is like the second Shang-Chi trailer. I myself know a little bit about the character. So does Jesse. We think we're gonna have something to share. But however, they made a lot of changes from just what I saw that I didn't like. So it's already like butting heads with what I like. And now we got this trailer in the context of that one. And together we're gonna have some thoughts to share. So without a further ado, we are going to start this brand new trailer of Shang-Chi.
So we go get a new shot of the new updated look of the Ten Rings as
Yep.
like wristbands instead of actual
Okay,
rings.
yeah. And this is it's a big departure. We have the flag, and then we have the gravity defying. So we got these rings, as you said, and they totally changed everything about them. They're no longer these rings, but they're these bands on the hands. So I'm speculating, this is my theory, is that in this version of the universe, of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's going to be like this lore of these ancient beings, let's say maybe these giants, maybe Fin Fang Foom, who wore these rings and they created those rings. So, those were the giants. So they had bigger fingers and stuff. So to them, those were rings. But when they passed it on to like the humans, they turn into like the bands. That's my theory. Because I guess
Well,
that just
as
makes them rings again.
back in the original comics lore, the Mandarin's rings, if I remember correctly, were actually extraterrestrial in origin. So
Yes.
it wouldn't be that far fetched to say that it could be from like a giant being or an alien being of some kind to be have a connection to these
Yep.
new looking rings.
It's like a very common misconception with the rings. People think they're mystical, but they're actually, like you said, extraterrestrial. So actually, let's see more of them. Okay, so we see a bunch of shots of this battle.
If you wanted them to be yours one day.
This brings us back reminiscent to the flag first seen back in the original Iron Man with the Ten Rings, was the group that kidnapped Tony Stark back in Iron Man 1.
And we have these shots of this battle, which are weird to me because they look like they take time in these ancient times. But then we have Shang-Chi's father, who looks pretty young in these shots
Perhaps
and in the modern times. So the question is, does he have immortality here?
immortality, or perhaps the rings have granted him some sort of
Longevity?
extended life.
Yeah, could be.
And this also just kind of bugs me is the fact that they feel like the Mandarin was kind of squandered because of all of the things that happened in Iron Man 3,
Oof, don't
being
remind me of
a
that.
primarily an Iron Man villain. It's kind of disappointing that we didn't get to see him included in that franchise properly. So now you've kind of incorporated him into Shang-Chi lore, even though technically in the comics he's not Shang-Chi's father.
That was one of the, if not the most biggest blunders of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Obviously, after Spider Man, is the Mandarin. Is how basically you didn't get the real deal you wanted out of Mandarin versus Iron Man, the classic duo. It's Iron Man's Joker, and you didn't give us that. You gave us some cheap knockoff for some sort of twist. Then you replace him with some lame guy who has some sort of heat powers from the what was it called, the
The
extremis?
Extremis.
Yeah, and then he went to call himself the real Mandarin, and that was such a slap in the face.
It was definitely a disappointment as far as MCU with their switch ups,
And
but we'll see how they handle them in this movie.
and now it's no longer you're not only just robbing Iron Man of giving him his arch enemy on the screen, you're giving it to someone else. You're giving the arch villain to someone else who is an Iron Man. and you're giving it to him, Shang-Chi. So you're already kind of butting heads with me when, just in general, when I heard of this project. That was the big problem I had, and it will be going forward because they're not going to change it. They think they can change it, but I won't
If you
settle
want
for
them
that.
to be yours one day, you have to show me you are strong enough to carry them.
By the way, here's a funny thing. Marvel is pandering this movie to China hard, and they're not very fond of this actor because they don't think he's attractive enough. They're calling him ugly in the comment sections of the Chinese trailer. So, um,
I don't know if it was this one, but I heard somewhere that they said he didn't look Chinese enough. I think was that this actor.
oh, okay, I didn't hear that one. But
I don't
either
know. It could have
way,
been something else, but I heard something like
oh
that.
yeah, either way, they're not very thrilled with this entire movie. I
You are a product of all who came before you.
okay, this is his mother, I guess.
The legacy of your family.
Yes.
You are your mother. And whether you
Or
like it or not,
perhaps she's just
So,
talking about her
your
mother.
father.
so mommy good, daddy bad. Okay, why did
So
it?
just looking at here at some of this fighting, I just wanted to say that
Glad
I believe it's been stated that Shang-Chi is actually one of the best fighters, or the best fighter in the Marvel universe, like hand-to-hand karate kind of kung fu kind of combat, even over the likes of like Iron Fist and such. And I don't remember exactly when he was given that title, but I have heard that. So he's definitely, been trained very well. So he's a formidable fighter in hand-to-hand combat.
I thought it was the other way around. I thought it was Iron Fist who was better.
I thought I heard it was Shang-Chi, but
They're probably either way in the Marvel universe. If it's ever going to come to that, it's probably going to be Shang-Chi who's going to be the
we
better
don't
one.
have we don't have Iron Fist in this continuity that we know of, unless they count the Netflix one. But
If they're
even
going
so,
to
the
introduce
Netflix one, I
Danny
would.
Rand for a sequel, if they introduce Danny Rand, either way, Shang-Chi is going to be the better one. It's just how it's going to be
Most definitely.
because I guess that's what they'd want to do. Let's see what else happens.
You're just a criminal who murders people.
Be careful how you speak to me, boy.
So like I was mentioning, it kind of looks like they're in San Francisco. I know the bus says California, but I've seen kind of the shots look like they're in San Francisco, which is actually where Ant-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is at. So, I mean, I don't know if he'd be pulled into this or anything. Maybe he's not there anymore. I don't know, but that could be interesting. Maybe he gets like a cameo or a mention or something about if they're in the same city. Because we
Just
know that based on the bus that they were driving there said California, so we know they're in California, and it looks for the shots we've seen of the city that they're in San Francisco.
in here we have basically what we've already seen in the first trailer is basically this sort of tension between the father and son in terms that the dad wants his son to be the next master, to take up the rings and all this stuff, become the new headmaster of these 10 rings organization, assassins, whatever. But he just wants to work in the regular world. He wants to just hang out with friends after work. He wants to have a normal life. And this is like the sort of stuff that's really kind of throwing me off in terms of Shang-Chi because he was always, the master of Kung Fu. So the fact that he's leading this sort of life, and also the fact that Shang-Chi is this very young, he's very young here. He's like in his, 20s? So they're already making these changes from the comic books that are very not in service of the character because, those comic books were very much in reference to the kung fu films from what was it 70s and
Well, his character is basically based on Bruce Lee, so yeah, back in the
exactly
70s and 80s eras.
and we're making him basically some kind of regular bloke who's just basically in a nutshell No, Dad, I don't want to be who you want me to be. As he runs off with the girl and leaves his football career behind. It sort of gives me that sort of vibe going on. And I'm not sure he's going to be kicking butt, but they're already making changes to Shang-Chi just to change him completely.
Start a new life.
This is pretty cool. The water scene with where he just moves around his hand in the water. It's going to be interesting to see what that is all about because that stuff looks cool.
But I could never escape his shadow.
Okay, so we see a battle between what I think is his mother and his father. Do you think that's the case?
I haven't seen enough to tell for sure, but it does kind of look like.
Because this place looks like, I don't know, it just looks kind of like where his mom was. And now it looks like they're fighting. So I don't know, but talking about like all the changes, I guess now is a good time to also talk about the Mandarin and how the real father in the comic books, like we talked about pre-show, is actually not the Mandarin, but it's Fu Manchu.
Yes, that's correct.
And so basically, Marvel Comics has this history of not even reprinting some of the original Shang-Chi comics because of the rights issues that have to do with Fu Manchu. But because Marvel is owned by Disney right now, I really see no reason why they really would have difficulty in acquiring rights to Fu Manchu. Like, how hard is that? If that's just
Well,
something
I've
I
also
don't buy.
heard that it was reasons of he was a little bit of racist or Asian stereotyping in some things, which is also why they tried to lean away from that, both in the comics and now, of course, in the movie. So that also could be partially why they've kind of made this switch for the movie.
Now that's hilarious coming from them since, they took the Asian villain of Iron Man, the Chinese villain of Iron Man, they took it away from him and they gave him to a Chinese superhero. They were like,
Well, if you
we
think about
need we
it,
need a
as far as
Chinese villain. Oh, who can we get? Oh, the Mandarin. Yeah, let's just give him to Shang-Chi because he's Asian too. Like that sounds.
well, if you look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they've had several mishaps with taking away Asian characters that were actual comic characters. So it's not just happening from other kinds of race swaps, but it's happening to their supposed diversity that they're really shooting for. But yet they took the Mandarin out of Iron Man and gave it to a white guy. And then if they take another one in Doctor Strange with the Ancient One, instead of having, an Asian man, older man playing him like the comics, they got a white woman. They have definitely not been a great track record with their Asian characters so far.
And just also another thing, going further than that, I think now in this movie they're not even going to call him the Mandarin because apparently that's going to be too problematic for them. They're going to call this character
Well,
something else.
I have not yet to hear his name in any of the trailers unless I missed it, and it definitely didn't hear the Mandarin, so that is entirely possible.
Yeah, let me check. So Google calls him the Mandarin. But in the movie, okay, so in the Wikipedia page just names him the Mandarin as well. So maybe they will call him the Mandarin. And it would be
Well, it's
extremely
already been
exactly it would be
it's
extremely weird not to call him the Mandarin since it's already been established that the Mandarin exists and the real one
yeah,
is
exactly.
out there.
Yeah, in Iron Man 3 it was already established, and there was apparently a short that came in that kind of rehinted
Yeah,
that the Mandarin was real afterwards anyway.
But they're definitely going to be changing his first name, which in the movie is going to be Wenwu. That's what they're going with. So let's see how they manage with the rest of it. Okay, here's
there.
something.
Now this is
Yep.
the part I've been interested in. Cat-like creature that we see that I actually didn't even notice in the first trailer as well. And I actually, when I first saw the flash by, I thought it was like a giant dog, but it looks more like a cat to me now.
Yeah.
And my speculation is, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with Shang-Chi, just thinking about Marvel characters,
So this
is
is back to that.
Zabu the
So we're going back to this flashback sort of, I think, scene, and you said it's who?
I that just coming to mind. I know, even though it has nothing to do with Shang-Chi and what's going on, at least that I know of, that this would be Zabu, the saber-toothed
Yeah.
tiger, is the first thing I thought of. And eventually you get a shot. I mean, when you slow it down and look really closely, it kind of looks like he might have the teeth, and he kind of looks more cat-like. And so it could be. I mean, I don't know what he got out of the Savage Land and all that stuff, because we haven't even touched any of that
You
movies,
know,
and it seems kind of an odd place to add a character or an animal like that. But it's the first thing that popped in my head as far as someone we've already know from the comics.
I'd be up for that just to bring in Kazar and Zabu. They were always an
That would
interesting
be
duo.
interesting.
And they'd probably find a way to tie you back to Shang-Chi somehow, just like they'll do with all these other things.
Well, it could be, if this is Zabu, they could be taking his origin out of the Savage Land and saying maybe he has something to do with what's going on here. Maybe he's not from the Savage Land in this, perhaps.
Or maybe they are fighting. No, probably not. Or maybe they just changed the location of the Savage Lands. It's in Asia now.
Well, I know the Savage Lands are awful a lot of times. They were first introduced in X-Men, and they've been tied to the X-Men a lot, so maybe that's why they haven't really touched any of that. Especially since they're big in vibranium and on stuff, and they've normally associated with that with Wakanda, but the Savage Land has a very big stockpile of it as well.
So was the Savage Land wasn't the Savage Land
This,
introduced along with Kazar, or did that come later in the
yes, it
mythology?
was. It was back in the original X-Men comics. They were introduced to Savage Land and Kazar, and the X-Men have had several stories tying them to the Savage Land. So I mean, he's appeared in a lot of other things throughout the years, but he was originally tied to the X-Men some in the early days.
And I also wanted to kind of, it's kind of weird to talk about this, but just the actor's body, because, uh, yeah, it's gonna be kind of weird. But if it's just talking about like the actors, I'm surprised he doesn't kind of look all that ripped. If I'm to be honest, you know what I mean?
But I don't know if they're putting as much emphasis on them being super ripped. Like, think back to like Hugh Jackman, how ripped he would try to
Yeah, and
those
he
Wolverine roles
would
and stuff. Like
Hugh
some of the guys.
Jackman Hugh Jackman even in like the Japanese, when he was in Japan, he looked sleek and ripped. So it's possible, obviously, and it looks.
So I don't know that they're still pushing that from the actors, because we've seen a lot of actors who, not talking about anything else but just their body types, don't always fit. Like sometimes they're smaller or bigger.
I mean,
Like they get like
have you seen Chris Hemsworth, who just posted like these new set pics from the Thor: Love and Thunder movie set, where he just looks extremely ripped, and I'm pretty sure Natalie Portman is also going to have these very impressive arms from the set
Well,
photos.
I tell you what, I just to get a little off topic, I do hope that Thor's pot belly is gone for this next movie. I will say that.
No, but I'm serious because if we're talking about like the actor and in terms of what he's doing and how much dedication he has for this and the quality and expectations they're putting on these actors, I'm not seeing the same sort of
Well, I
dedication in
will
terms of just what we've seen before
I
and what we'll see later.
I will say this. I will say this, that he may not be as super ripped as like a Thor, but Shang-Chi's character, I mean, I've never thought of him to be a super ripped character. Like, you think of like how he's modeled on Bruce Lee. I never Bruce Lee was kind of like a smaller guy. You know, I mean, he was in good shape and everything, but he was never like Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, this huge bodybuilder guy. So I don't necessarily think that that would be a requirement for Shang-Chi. So I don't think that it's as big a deal as maybe as like Thor was like.
Yeah, but Bruce Lee had abs. This guy has barely any definition. He had abs. You know, he was like very defined. This guy is like in comparison to him. You can have, like I said, with Hugh Jackman, you can have a slim body and still kind of like show off your muscle. And I'm just not seeing this. So, and you know, out of superheroes, you know, some women go to superhero movies expecting to see them, and I'm just saying, you know, even Star Lord, what's his name? Chris Pine
Chris
was.
Pratt.
Yeah,
Chris Pratt.
sorry, I'm getting my Chris's confused. Chris Pratt was able
Too
to
many Chris's.
get his belly cut out just through sheer workout.
Well,
And
that's
here we
true.
have,
They do like their shirtless guys in
yeah,
those movies.
we had Fu Manchu right there. And now he's fighting who I'm hearing is supposed to be his sister, or they don't know their brother and sister. So, and from what I understand, Shang-Chi had a sister in the comic books, but it was very complicated as well.
From your past.
And we have the rings again. And they work different. By the way, you know, these changes, I gotta say, when it comes to the rings, they're pretty cool. Because it just makes visually, it makes sense. They're much more interesting to look at in that way. When I see the film itself, I might change my mind, but you know, they did sort of the same thing for Doctor Strange, how they sort of changed the way the magic works visually just so that it looks cooler to watch. They kind of made the magicians in the Doctor Strange movies look like they're sort of fighters in a sort of way when they slam their fists together and they make all these different poses, these gestures, and you know, I figured, you know, it adds this nice flair to the action.
I was gonna say I can see in some situations that based on comics that there could be things you might want to tweak or upgrade to a certain extent on some things, like maybe the rings. Like I won't know. I'm gonna wait to say my judgment on the rings until I see
Yeah.
how they're talked about and shown in the movie. They do look kind of cool, but you know, there's also the comic part of my brain that knows what they're like in the comics, so that it's a little thing that
Yeah.
I notice, but I wanna see how their origin is, like where they came from, what they're about before I judge to say how I feel necessarily about them. But visually, they do look cool in the context without knowing or thinking too much about the comic.
And looking at them here, the ones in the comic books, each of them had different powers. So like telekinesis, fire, ice. I'm not seeing a lot of that here. So maybe when we see the movie that's going to be different, but I'm seeing just a lot of like maybe gravity based powers right here just throughout this entire trailer. A lot of bluish purple. So yeah. Hopefully we're gonna see all the powers the rings have. Okay,
Now we've got Dragon,
yeah, we got Dragon there.
which, as much as some comic fans would have thought it would be cool to see someone like Fing Fang Foom, uh, I've heard that based on a Funko Pop kind of spoil that's called the Great Protector, and so that's kind of
Oh,
who this dragon is. It's more of a generic dragon. It's not one of the like Xiao Lao from the Iron Fist stuff or
I was gonna
Fing
say
Fang
maybe that
Foom,
was the next possibility.
but this is called, I believe, the Funko. It is called the Great Protector, so it is kind of a different dragon than those couple that I've heard people speculate, and myself included, when I first saw it. Because that would be definitely would be cool to see one of those other well-known dragons kind of appear in this.
What do you think? What if maybe this is Fin Fang Foom, but Marvel changed his name because reasons?
It is possible. Maybe he's called that in the movie and that's too goofy. I don't know. That's some old classic Marvel naming right there, and so it's possible. We don't get a super good look at the rest of him, just mostly his head. So it could very well be a version of him. They could have tweaked it for that they do that sort of stuff all the time, as we know. So it definitely could be connected or amalgamation of different dragons. Who knows?
He looks so cute. His nostrils. They're gonna sell those plushies, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna do well. Um, but I was gonna say, if you're going to do the Mandarin, it sort of makes sense. It's like almost the next go to is to do Fin Fang Foom, so it'd be weird not to do that.
Definitely would be cool to see it if it does end up happening.
Okay, and we got
So as
back
I
and forth.
assume from the final fight, looks like you notice how when Shang-Chi looks like he has a hold of some of the rings, perhaps they're different colors when he holds them, and I don't kind of they're doing that for like a visual point, but maybe the different holders give them different powers or different glows or something.
So
This shot gives me very Mortal Kombat vibes. The lighting and the lightning, it kind of looks like lightning, like a Raiden fight or something. Just kind of cool looking visuals.
and if we look behind Shang-Chi, we have the red door from before. Huh, interesting. So maybe they are trying to open the gates of the Fin Fang Foom, maybe. I don't know, I'm just speculating. But it looks pretty cool the way it is here, but what shoes is he wearing? It's like some kind of sneakers.
I think we see him in sneakers earlier in the trailer, some of the fights, but they were more in the city.
You got this.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
Thank you.
So apparently, well, the first thing, obviously, Abomination. That was the first thing I noticed. This thing that stood out the biggest in the
That is
trailer was
what
seeing
everyone
Abomination.
noticed. Yeah.
Now, it was actually somewhere else I saw on YouTube, someone commented fighting Wong, and I wasn't even paying any attention to who he was fighting, but I did see his Wong and Doctor Strange's as you're talking about the magic symbol, the orange, when right before he in this shot right here, right before you get slung into the
Yeah.
wall by Abomination, so it probably is Wong. But I had no idea. I wasn't even paying attention to Wong because I saw Abomination, and I'm like, yes. We haven't seen him since the Incredible Hulk, and their one reference in Agents of Shield that they had him locked up, so I don't know how he got out or
Yeah, but no one cares
what's
about
going
the
on.
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
And that doesn't count anymore as canon, I suppose. So who knows what he's been doing for the past decade? I guess just getting into cage fights, and he looks a lot more comic accurate. As you see, he has the fin ears and all that, so he looks a little more like Abomination we're familiar with.
The design is awesome. Definitely an upgrade.
Yeah.
I'm kind of confused what Wong would be doing here.
Well, Wong getting into a cage fight seems a little out of character.
Yeah, very much so.
Maybe he's not in there of his own will, perhaps.
But they're doing it. But they're doing it again. It's just just add a Chinese or an Asian character to an Asian movie because Shang-Chi's Asian.
Now, this is just speculation, but in the recent Falcon Winter Soldier show, they introduced us to Mandrapore, which is known to having places like this with fights. So maybe that could be the location of where these fights are happening. I don't know for sure.
Could be. Looking at the
this
crowd.
also, just thinking about the matter, to speculate. I know it's all speculation at this point, but we have Abomination, who's a Hulk guy. We've got Wong, who's with Doctor Strange. And we've got maybe Zambu, who's with not anything usually associated with Shang-Chi. Maybe Fin Fang Foom. So it looks like a lot of characters who
and the Mandarin
aren't necessarily.
From Iron Man.
That's true. And so there's a lot of characters who are not necessarily associated with someone like Shang-Chi or these kind of side of the Marvel Universe being brought in. So maybe that's to bring in some more interest, or maybe they're to connect to something else going on. I don't know. I do know the Abomination is set to appear in the She-Hulk show, so maybe they're just trying to get him refreshed in the fans' mind before he comes back, since it's been so long since we've seen him, perhaps.
You mentioned all those characters that aren't Shang-Chi characters at all, and it really just put into perspective for me how just in general, not only like this trailer and probably the movie itself is going to really show that is we are just showing random stuff that maybe not so random, but stuff that has nothing to do with the character itself, and we're more so selling the movie based on not the character itself, himself, or anyone else, but just these random references. And like, come on, you didn't really need to show us Abomination and Wong in the trailer itself. That would have been an awesome surprise, but because I think personally, Marvel is worried in terms of how it's going to perform because we'll see how it's going to do with Black Widow because I'm
Well, it
hearing mixed things on that. So, and whenever movie studios show too much from their movies in the trailers, it's usually not a good sign. It's a sign of a lack of confidence.
Well, I take a couple points from that, as you're like, they don't like Shang-Chi isn't as well known. He's never been a household name in Marvel.
But then, Kevin
So
Feige said,
so
it doesn't matter if he's not popular in the comics because, these are the movies. We can make the characters popular just by the movies. But then again, you're using characters that aren't associated to the character just to, you're not using the character to make him popular. You're using these other characters to make him popular. So you're contradicting yourself, Kevin
well,
Feige.
perhaps they're doing this to draw in comic fans who see, oh look, Abomination, oh look, Wong
Oh
from
yeah,
Doctor
this was
Strange, or oh look,
definitely
maybe. And so
definitely
it's like they gives them some sort of reason to invest in this character, because they know that their track record has not been always great, at least recently, with how they've adapted some of these things to
because who
comic
else?
fans
What
for
else?
specifically.
If you take out all these characters that aren't related to Shang-Chi, what else would the people be talking about on the internet other than, oh yeah, these fights look cool? Like, what do you think would be a talking point if they didn't include
I believe it
Abomination, Wong?
wouldn't be it. I don't think there would be a lot, because the main
Exactly.
talking points that I have heard has been, oh my gosh, it's Abomination or
Yep.
Wong or something. Like I've heard, but I never heard anyone say anything about Shang-Chi.
And let me tell you this, I always wanted Abomination to sort of
Been
make
talked
a
about, at least that I've heard.
I always wanted Abomination to make a return in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That was before Endgame. Um, and seeing him in this new cool design, I appreciate, but I didn't want him to appear like this in a cage fight and not even in a Hulk related film. He's not really going to get a lot of screen time, and I don't care about the She-Hulk TV show because I assume it's going to get a lot of things wrong, and I don't think Abomination is the place, or sorry, She-Hulk isn't the place to do Abomination. Uh, and I wanted all these characters that I wanted to get more attention, like Wanda, like Hawkeye. I wanted those characters to get a little bit more attention, but they're giving us them, but only in these secondary roles or in these spin-offs that don't really matter. And yeah, I guess you could say one division matters, but it's still like a not a movie level thing where you want to get more of
Well,
that.
I will say this. I'm all for like getting some like lesser known or side characters some love, like from the comic. Not no, I'm not. Don't mistake it for me saying that they should have all characters they made in the last 5 years come in before all these other characters they've had for 60 years. I don't mean it like that, but like some of these other characters, like Wanda and Vision getting a show, or Hawkeye getting a show. I think the principle, like the idea, the concept is good. I don't think that these shows so far have delivered on their potential, because I feel like in an episodic way that you can get more of the story across if they do it right than just in a 2 hour movie. So I think that it's a good way to give these other characters some time and to explore these other characters if they do it right. Now, granted, I don't think they have, and the more current stuff we've gotten, the more it's veered away from the source material,
Yeah.
which is what real comic book people have really not liked. But granted, so far the MCU, in the eyes of normal fans, they can do no wrong, and they're really going to be put to the test with movies like Shang-Chi and the Internals, who are not household names. So we'll see if people still react that way, or if this maybe gives Marvel pause to take a step back and have to reevaluate things.
You give us 10 hours of content like WandaVision, Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and you somehow manage to stray further away from the source material, and you still somehow manage to not give us enough of your version of these characters, because these characters seem sort of rushed, if I'm to be honest, in these Disney Plus shows. If you even look at the Winter Soldier and his story arc in the TV show, and the way Vision was portrayed in WandaVision, Wanda's entire evil arc, she wasn't very much treated as a villain or as a bad person in the moment, and Loki so far is very slow, and uh, it's just interesting to me how they make these excuses, how we're going to give these characters more time, but but it actually doesn't change a lot, and this isn't how I wanted these characters to be shown. This is why when I see Abomination, this is why I'm not excited, because I know he's not going to get his proper due like he did in the first Incredible Hulk movie, where you got a little bit of what you wanted in terms of action and portrayal. And if I wanted more of that, this is definitely not what I'm going to get.
Well, I will say, he isn't. I wouldn't expect him, like in my mind, to be prominent player in this movie. But I do hope, considering the setting and the way they're talking about Shang-Chi, I hope that we get a decent little fight between Abomination and Shang-Chi. I thought that'd be cool.
I
So
can
hopefully
assure
they at
you,
least give us a nice little thing.
the way this is edited, that is not going to be the case, because I don't think that's going to be the case, because in the trailer that we see, you see several shots and this exact same location, but he's fighting his who will be his probably his sister. But and I think this is just a it's just edited in a way that makes you think that Aquafina's character is talking about Abomination when they're actually talking about that woman in the cage and not Abomination
That's
himself.
true.
I think this is just
This
edited
could
in a
be
way.
this could just be like they walk into the place and in the background you see Wong and Abomination fight to kind of set the scene and like, oh, cool. But then not
Yeah.
actually have either of them fight Shang-Chi. But I can still hope that maybe it's hard to put too much hope into some of these things, but maybe they'll surprise us with something, and even a little thing like this fight could be something to help the movie if they were to do it.
I bet you that's going to happen. Alright, so we're at the end of the trailer.
There were definitely some cool moments, but like I said, a lot of the standout moments were the cameo kind of Easter eggs hidden in the thing, like the extra characters like Abomination or the mysterious cat that I'm calling Zabu and the dragon. Like those were the things that stood out to me more than the actual character of Shang-Chi or his surrounding characters. Like, so they're drawing us in based on the not the main characters, which concerns me. And really, I don't honestly know what to expect. I feel like it could be a fun movie. Will it be a great one? I don't feel like just based on the trailer it's going to be one of the great ones.
They're trying to sell this more with characters who aren't Shang-Chi. They're trying to sell this off with everything but him. I don't know.
I'm curious to see how Marvels do this year because we have a Black Widow movie that I've completely lost interest in, honestly,
Me
from the way
too.
it's been pushed back so much. Also, being the fact that a Black Widow movie probably would have made more sense happening several years ago. You know, like maybe instead of shoving Captain Marvel at us, you could have made a Black Widow movie or something. I don't know, just a thought. And then we get Shang-Chi and the Eternals, who are both not super big names, so not really sure what to think of those and how they'll be done. And then a Spider-Man movie that we just who knows with the Spider-Man movies. There sounds like there's going to have all these characters coming back, and so it's going to be an interesting year to see how the MCU does. Not to mention, coupled with some lackluster TV shows, in my opinion. So, I mean, I don't know. The people could eat it up, but I'm just not really seeing how it's going to be a super successful year for Marvel, despite the amount of stuff they're throwing at us this
And this version of Shang-Chi that I could pretty much sum up with a meme, which is, you have the loser guy on the left and you have the Chad. The guy on the left is this guy who, the regular Joe who, no, Dad, I don't want to be a fighter. I just want to be a loser who just has a regular life. Please leave me alone. To the Chad from the comic books who fights and is this master of kung fu, and he was betrayed by his father. He felt betrayed, and now he's his sworn enemy. That sort of stuff I am not seeing here. We're just seeing what the MCU will be trying to do.
Well, it makes you wonder if he, like in the trailer, it states his dad let him off into the world for 10 years. How is he still the greatest fighter if he's not, at least appears to be, been training and fighting still for the last decade that he's been off in the world? So how is he still at the top of his game? Is there going to be like a point where he has to go back and retrain? Like, I don't know, but just some questions that the trailer brings up.
Maybe it's going to be like riding a bicycle, it's just kind of learn, but you're right. If he's going to be going head to head with someone who is still at their A game and has so much experience, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. This brings us to the end of this video. So make sure to like, sub, comment obviously what your thoughts on the trailer were, what you thought about our discussion.
Look out for new content, and thanks for watching, and let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to cover.
Thanks again, and see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Is this what you wanted?